What's poppin', fellas? Today we got ourselves recap of week 2. Um, I didn't have time to take like 2 hours of notes on all of the games before starting commentating. I only commentated already on this game that you see here, which was the first in order once again. As for the other games, I'm not sure that they're all in order. And I only managed to catch a brief glimpse of them. But in any case, I want to bring these games to you. They're all relatively quick, and you know, if there are any thoughts and opinions that you'd like to share, I'd only be happy to try to answer to them in any of the comments of the videos. So I'll go ahead and before I start, I guess you could always click the button. I'm not even gonna say it because it's too cringy. All right, so we got Century Express versus Fear. This was something that I'm sure a lot of us were eagerly waiting for. In fact, I'd say that just about all of the games were very nice this week. So, what exactly do you expect from someone like Century Express? Thing is, CE is kind of he has his own brand of GSC. I would say it's not one that I always subscribe to, but it's pretty interesting because he can really accommodate it to his level of play and really pose a threat. So you really need to prep very hard against a player like this. He's not easy to prep against. You know, like if you take me, I'm someone who's more by the book, so I would also be easy to play against or prep against, but I'm also not so great at counter prepping. So Fear, on the other hand, proves equally, to be equally difficult, if not even more difficult, to be prepped against. And you see here he's rocking his recent avatar from that he won from GSC PL3, as he was co-managing with Mr. 378, and they won the Iron Man Machamps. So let's get into this game here, and to start off, I'm sure some of you already know we got Jinx Eggy. So the deal with Jinx Eggy is that I said in my last video, Eggy doesn't always like to stay in on Jinx, even the Miracle Berry sets, because Jinx is so commanding Amon with its amazing stab that it basically can get Thief for free. It can run Thief in the lead position without any repercussions and take away Thief from extremely valuable pieces. What do I mean with this? I mean mons that are sleep talkers and would otherwise like to keep those leftovers against Jinx. So I'm talking about Lax, Raikou, and even in certain occasions Zapdos. So there are plenty of would-be checks to Jinx that just hate the stolen lefties. And that doesn't mean that just because it took your leftovers away, it's not Lovely Kiss, or it's not Sub, or it's not something else. You still have to factor in everything. So it's very scary. And since people respect Thief, in certain cases, they respect Thief more than they would respect Sleep. Say if you're on a stall team, what's more valuable, having a mon slept or kept awake, or having a mon lose its leftovers? For most people, it's going to be Thief. But since Century Express is most likely not using stall, the concern is, okay, what am I going to have absorb that sleep powder? And usually you don't have that many options. You only have like one, maybe two sleep talkers. So even if you were Miracle Berry, Fear can go for Thief here without too many repercussions. And if it were to do that and you were to stay in, they take away your Miracle Berry, you go for Sleep Powder, and it's back to square one. Except this time you don't have anything to block status. So, yeah. So perhaps wishful thinking, Century Express goes to Zapdos. Not always super advisable, but it could also just be that there's no other option, no better option. Lots of players try to. Lots of good players will try to hold on to Lovely Kiss as long as possible. Now, we still don't actually know what set this Jinx is. All we know is that it has Ice Beam, but there are so many variations of Jinx, and they all need to be respected just the same. So now Century Express goes to Snorlax because, again, no other choice. And in just 3 turns, we've seen 3 Ice Beams being thrown. That's very high odds of freezing something. Century Express is going to go to Cloyster. So we also saw preemptive rest from Lax here. Not going to be helping Century Express all that much, especially if Fear has a Gengar in the back. Yeah. So we do see a Psychic here, which is which was meant to hit the Cloyster as it 2-hit KOs it. And remember, we still haven't seen Lovely Kiss. So the Cloyster could not have done anything. And then on this turn, turn 6, Fear stays in, interestingly. By now, personally, if I were Fear, I would have at least clicked. I might have clicked sub once, seeing how good it's been doing into him. It would have potentially given me the opportunity to, chip the Lax a lot. But that's not what he does. Instead, he did stay in on a turn where he could have taken a lot of damage. Double Edge, Earthquake, Flamethrower, basically all Sleep Talk Laxes can deal a lot of damage to Jinx and break subs. Earthquake's actually slightly stronger than Flamethrower against Jinx, so yeah. In comes Cloyster, so very, very similar, very much akin to what had happened in the previous game. Fear is with a slight lead in terms of Spike's advantage, and this is going to bring them forward a bit as Fear gets toxic on the Cloyster, and his own Cloyster also gets toxic. So he's just going to go straight to Zapdos. And we're going to see from this point what's going to happen. Now, in the past, we've seen Fear run a team like this. In fact, he was one of the people to pioneer non-Sleep Talk Zapdos, like in SPL XII or something, ran a team, a cord that looked very similar to this. Jinx, Cloy, Zapdos, and the Zapdos was Whirlwind. So at this point, Fear could easily whirlwind the hell out of Century Express and do a lot of nice stuff. T-Bolt, Thunder, all of that stuff, Oko's, Cloyster. But Century Express is going to go to Licks, so that's nice. Licks plus Exeggutor is nice to have on offense, not just because they're 2 booms to threaten Zap with, but also because one can check Hidden Power Water Zapdos, while the other checks Hidden Power Ice relatively well. So that's something to keep in mind, as CE is going to... Oh my, I'm tired. He's going to roar in Cloyster and is most likely going to be forced to switch out here. And we see this amazing, very nice double from Fear. So just to go back 1 turn in case we missed it, this is the initial part of turn 12. And then we're going to see turn 13. So the end of turn 12 is Cloy versus Licks. And we see the Cloy switch out first because it's faster. And in comes the Zapdos on the other end. And this Zapdos cannot afford to click rest. It would only be worse off if it did. So Fear again outmaneuvering and going to Licks this time. So we finally see a Licks. And by this point, had we seen, I don't know, something like a Golem, then the team would have been pretty much identical to the team before, which was Gengar, Golem, Jinx, Cloy, Zap, Lax. But it's not. Probably very intuitive, pretty smart not to do that, because you would be, as Fear once told me, you would be 6-0'd by Surf T-Tar. So not fun. Instead he has a Licks, which could eventually check something along the lines of that, but I think the Lix is also nice in general. We're going to see how it plays into this. So we do see a curse, and this is nice. We haven't yet seen any moveset on Century Express, but it should be noted that Sleep Talk Lax, for the most part, doesn't like to stay in on curse Licks for any reason whatsoever, even if it is Fire Blast, which is like the move it can do, the single move it can do the most damage with. But not really favorable, as now Licks can deal 40%, it can definitely Oko it, a bunch of stuff. So even if it had a good move for it, Century Express is most likely switching out there. Going to deal some chip to the Eggy, and eventually this Eggy will be chipped down. And here was where I was so perplexed, because we see this situation and everyone must be thinking, well, that was a good turn for CE. What are we going to do? Is there any Mon that could possibly switch into this? And if you were to say no, you wouldn't be wrong, because it doesn't look like there's any switch in for Eggy. But there is a sleep powder, and when I saw this, I was like, oh my god. Oh my lord, that was such a bad move. But then we see Sleep Talk on turn 18, and I just lost my shit when I saw that. I was like, what? Oh my god. That was crazy. So, Sleep Talk Jinx. So, no Lovely Kiss, no Sub, no Thief. It deals damage to everything. It can 1 or 2 hit KO. It can 2 hit KO 4 Mons at least. And we haven't even seen the last Mon on Century Express's team yet. Century Express's team looks like it could be a Vaporeon in the back. But Vaporeon is kind of slow for today's meta. Not really advisable. It's pretty easy to react to. A lot of people run offense. Other people might use Machamp. That is a known last Mon for this kind of core. And other people even use Gengar, because Gengar just has good synergy with Eggy and Steelix. And here we see it. Here's the Gar. In comes Eggy. So Giraffe made a good comment on that earlier. In our commentary, we see Gar come in. Lax at +1 would Oko a Gengar. So if you don't have Destiny Bond, that's not looking good for you. Because you can't break this Lax. And we don't know if the Zapdos has Thunder, so you'd have to Boom, then Thunder on it to kill it. It's not very consistent. So if you don't have Destiny Bond, that can be bad. For the same reason, Fear doesn't want to lose his Lax to a Destiny Bond. So he's going to curse a second time, knowing that the Gengar can't break him. And that's kind of scary, because if it were Hypnosis, someone could have gambled, done that, and if this is Curse EQ, that would be lights out. And what reason would we have for it to be Sleep Talk Mono Lax? So anyways, Eggy comes in on that turn that it clicked Curse, puts the Lax to sleep, and this is looking pretty bad. So if the first Sleep Powder didn't look good, the second one looks even worse for us. So Lix comes in, and Century Express must be feeling very safe now. He has a very healthy team, besides Zap. Relatively healthy, I would say. As he goes to his Executor, probably expecting the Surf there. And in came that Gengar. And in comes the Jinx. So just to pause here on this turn in particular, we see that Fear very much has been prepping against Century Express. It looks like Century Express's team just cannot handle this Jinx. And if it weren't bad enough, Ice isn't good into this team. Like, Century Express just can't handle it. And Surf like water, is also pretty damning. So the support from Cloyster is also very nice to have. And we see that the Lax is forced to come in. We know it's Sleep Talk, so as soon as this Lax is gone, if Fear gets a boom, and he has 3 potential boom months, then I think the Jinx is just free to spam moves. I mean, it already is without too much deterring it. So, like, for instance, on this turn, the Jinx could have come right back in. And then what? You know, we haven't seen a freeze yet. The Lax sets up. It did wake up quite early, if I do say so myself. And there's a return. Sorry about that. On this turn, there is a roar. So the roar is just not to get damage. And I suppose to be able to win through through the Lax. So we see a Surf. And now this Eggy is definitely in range of Ice Beam. It might already have been, but it is for sure now. And Jinx is just going to come right back in. Jinx could get a freeze here. Could get a Psychic, a Spadef drop, all kinds of things. In comes Zapdos, and that's pretty curious. Why? Well, if you go to Licks, it does technically expose you to Zapdos or other mons. So we see Reflect on this turn, which is interesting. Now in GSC Invitational, we've seen lots of Reflect Zapdos. They run Whirlwind. Some of them run T-Bolt, some run Thunder. But the idea here is to attack the Lax, chip it down a bit, bring it to a point where at 1 or 2 turns burnt, the Lax is forced to rest, and you're basically forcing it to consume Sleep Talk BP. You're forcing it into a situation where it has to come into Jinx with some damage on it. Things like these, just little optimizations that help the team very much. Yeah. I'm gonna switch out there. Oh my. And this was an interesting turn as well, to switch in your own Lax on the other one. Pretty scary, if I do say so myself. Curse. What does he do? He goes back. So each time he sees the Eggy, he's just gonna go to Jinx. So rinse and repeat. A crit will be death for CE, of course, but that doesn't happen. So far turns are going well, and we see turn 48, Fear bringing in his Lax, which is pretty interesting. Mind you, EQ does a lot to Jinx, so it would have been... He basically predicted a mid-ground move without going to his own Zap. And this is a really awkward point, because we've seen Sleep Talk, of all things, on Fear's Lax. So it's Mono Talk, no Pursuit support. Ugh, my cat. Go away. All right, so we have this scenario with Sleep Talk. And this deals a significant amount of damage with that return there. This turn, the speed tie didn't necessarily matter. Of course, the crit would have made it matter, but in this turn, oh, for Christ's sake. This turn here, we have a really deadly outcome for both players. And you have to wonder, how how would this go down? Would it bode well for Fear, or would it bode well for Sentry Express? We know Sentry Express has Sleep Talk, EQ, so it can definitely handle Jinx. We also know that Fear has T-Bolt, so it's not super likely going to be able to take out that. The Snorlax is not very likely to be taken out. So even if Fear stays in and attacks the Snorlax, basically it's a battle of who manages to click Double Edge or return first or rest. That is also an option, and that option beats return if your Pokemon goes first. It also beats Double Edge if your Pokemon goes first. Personally, I was thinking that Sentry Express would want to take out Fear's Lax, because by having them lose the Lax, he can start applying a lot more pressure with his special offense. He could boom on Zapdos and do things like that, do a lot of nice things. That's what I thought. Though, in defense of this, Sentry Express could switch out his Mon and hope to preserve the Lax somehow, which is also plausible to some extent. After all, we've seen how deadly Jinx is. So, in a way, Fear was pretty smart because he managed to make it so that Sentry Express is now forced to make a really, really risky and most likely unfavorable play. It looks like it's all high risk, low rewards for both players. But it's actually going to turn out to be a high reward for whomever is, I guess, luckier. As Fear values taking out that Lax no matter what. And that's what he goes for. He decides, okay, if you manage to take out my Lax with yours, you'll get some chip. You'll be in range of a move. So he brings in his Jinx again, and neither of the two lost their Lax yet. But they're both pretty much dead. And Steelix gets frozen. That's a 3% chance. And then it thaws out all on the same turn. So that is a 0.3% chance. Fear isn't going to let his Jinx die. We've seen how well it's been going, so he brings in his Cloyster. It's served its purpose. He has Hypnosis on the Gar and tries to put that other Mon to sleep, but doesn't manage to. Gar on Gar is sometimes kind of rare, but it's actually pretty straightforward what you want to do with it. And here we see another Ice Punch. No freeze. But there's a T-Bolt. And Sentry Express really needed to kill that Gar, but his Gar gets put to sleep, which sucks. He's going to keep it as fodder so he can still wall the Lax somehow. And here he could rest, but Fear is just going to boom. And now the tides have turned. Pretty much everything loses to Jinx and Zapdos. And Fear won the game. Although, we do see a nice Hidden Power Ice crit. But yeah, it's over. Because the Gengar is asleep. Okay, moving on. I mean, I think this was an excellent team. I can't even break down how good it is. You have a sleeper like you'd normally expect on a Jinx Gar Lix team to have. You have a good Sleep Talker. You have a good T-Tar check in Steelix. And there's the spikes for pressure. Jinx overall is just such a potent special attacker that there isn't really all that much that can check it, even the ones that offensively do. Yeah. And the Reflect is just excellent support for Mons that are otherwise physically frail. So, really, really nice. Sentry Express's team is also pretty solid. There's nothing wrong with his team. Now we got Raichi in D4. I predicted Raichi to win. But, yeah. I don't know. This game was kind of interesting to me. Raichi is just a really good, in my opinion, at least with regards to what I give him credit for. And D4 is also doing pretty good. I kind of actually I think I may have been not. I guess I wasn't sold on his performance last week. He was good, but yeah. So going into this game, we got Cloy on Cloy. For obvious reasons, it's going to be easy to lay the spikes. Some Cloy leads like to have a Miracle Berry in case they run into a Sleep Talker. Most Cloister teams can afford to go to their Raikou in the back as a check to many Lovely Kiss users. So, yeah. Some of those have a Blissey, but yeah. So, Raichi gets a Toxic up, but he also heals up. So, with both spikes on the field, he's going to be able to keep some semblance of an advantage because his Cloister is not poisoned, but it also doesn't have lefties. And Nidoking is going to come in on this Zapdos. And in the 1v1, it's slightly in Zapdos's favor. So there's an Ice Beam. You have to watch out for a follow-up counter. And D4 does just that, which is already very impressive in my opinion. It's not easy to respect counter, but it's also so beneficial when you do. And you go to your lax, you go in on an Ice Beam. It's a fairly safe play, but it's an underrated one at that. So tip my hat to D4 for that, as he manages to keep his Zapdos alive for this. Some people will click another move intentionally just not to get hit, but then they'll get hit by Ice Beam. So going to the lax was a good middle ground play. In comes the Gengar, and there's a D-Punch, so that misses. In comes the Licks. And so far it's fairly even. I can't speak. It's fairly even. And yes, well, Zapdos is going to try to chip that lax. It can hope for a series of bad turns, a crit of some sort, things like that. But Thunder in and of itself isn't going to kill this lax. Not into a Hidden Power after 2 Thunders. It doesn't really do that. And now we see the sad side of having no lefties, as they go for a Surf. I did forget to mention that earlier Raichi had gone for Toxic as the Gengar came in, and to me that wasn't really a good play because he already poisoned one Mon. Zapdos, for all we know, could be Sleep Talk. So yeah, you could be putting it on a timer, which is always nice. And I guess that's a huge commitment, but it's a very committal play. And then there's Lax and Gengar, which don't super mind the Toxic, especially because the Lax was asleep at the time. So kind of high risk. Nidoking. And then we see Roar. So Nidoking Roar is really nice, but I don't think I've ever seen Ice Beam counter Roar. The cool part about Roar is that you get to force Lax to more or less go for a move that they think they're safe clicking. But then unfortunately, you get to reset the scenario where if they click Rest, for instance, they are then phased out and now have to burn 2 sleep turns again, maybe coming in on a Zapdos. So, good on Raichi to bring Roar Nidoking. It also potentially enables other Mons like back Tar, so you could have a offensive Mon in the back, like a Mixed Tar, Screech Set, D-Punch, a bunch of things. In comes the Zap. And we see here the Thunder and its benefits. Of course, the Double Edge is going to get the Lax to chip itself down. And if let's say this Lax it still had one more turn, then if I were Raichi, I might have clicked Thunder again. Who knows? Maybe chip it down to a percentage where it can get Thunder KO'd. So that didn't turn out to be the case, though. It went for the rest. In comes this Gengar on the opposing Gengar. D4 is slightly chipped down. And we see a Psychic, which is like, what? Psychic on Gengar? And that's pretty crazy. Usually there isn't much space for variation, or so you would think, on a Gengar. But it's not so much that there isn't. It's just that sometimes Bolt Beam proves to be so consistent. You have T-Bolt, you have Ice Punch. It's really nice. So, yeah. The reason why Psychic is so good is that it hits certain mons like Nidoking. It can hurt Gengar. You occasionally do see Psychic on Misdreavus, on stall teams, and it's meant specifically for that because of how good they can be against stall. So, yeah. Psychic and fighting is just generally a good coverage if you think about it. It's not that hard to understand why. So this T-Tar is coming in, and it gets hurt by the spikes. It's kind of scary to stay in on Gengar because you can lose 50%, and you can hit yourself, and everything can go wrong. Rock Slide, and probably, decent switch to the Gengar now in this position. Raichi's Gengar can kill this Gengar, and it was a good idea, good planning, I would say. Unfortunately, the T-Bolt does not cut it. It doesn't deal 37 like it said it did. It actually dealt 36. And so, this Gengar's living. And all of a sudden, there's a team that may or may not be able to hit this Mon, and they're facing a Gengar. And there's a 50% chance that Raichi's still going to have to deal with it, and this Gengar is going to take down more than one Mon with it. There's a 50% chance of that. And that's exactly how it seems to go down, because he loses the speed tie, and D4 just dips. Goes to Licks. Great play, obviously. And we see Surf. He just switches right out, even though Earthquake would have certainly killed. And that's super diligent play. Really good on D4s. I was actually quite impressed with that. It's as if he's been prepping, but also prepping in play, like just testing a bunch of games, looking out for all kinds of different options, all kinds of things, and also has some slight optimizations of his own. Now, Rock Slide Surf isn't all too common. I don't particularly love it on offense, but it's a slight adaptation here. Raichi going for a Rock Slide there and taking an EQ in the process. It's not a particularly high roll. And we see Screech, and that's when I'm thinking to myself, dang, Screech and Surf I don't really love it. I like Screech and Earthquake more. So in comes this Lax, and now Raichi has somehow to find a way to 3v6. There's no normal resist, so he's going to take that boom. Now it's 2v5. And look at just salt in the wound. The Gengar lives the spikes with 1% or 2% and takes out the Nido with Psychic. He was in range to survive, and the Nido wasn't. And so this Lax is forced to boom, and this Gengar took down 3 pokes. Just utter devastation. So putting it in range of a T-Bolt. Now we got the Ruiners versus the... What are they called? The Tyrants. So... Seattle coming off of a win. Jester coming off of a loss. We'll see if that changes for our capped hero. And we got this sequence here. So immediate reveal of double elect, which is pretty odd, honestly. It's not something I see all too often in SPL, but you know, it has its moments. So this play, oh man, I really liked that switch. Turn 3 switch. So he has a Lax, and in all likelihood, Siatam is going to switch to something else. Could switch to a Cloyster, could switch to a normal resist. All of those Mons, which are weak to Jinx, and then turn 4 is the cherry on top as he gets a Thief. So basically, he made up for his play on turn 1, where he was more or less forced to go for Ice Beam on the off chance that Siatam were a crackhead and were to go for the crackhead play of Thunder. Thunder isn't a terrible play against Jinx. You get 50% and you can 2-hit KO the Jinx, you know. So you usually want to punish that with Ice Beam, but that also means it comes at the cost of not being able to click Thief turn 1. And with this slight, you know, switch up, you know, going back and forth there between the Lax and stuff, he manages to get Thief on a very valuable piece, and that was really good. Really good. Now the Raikou is at 73% with no lefties whatsoever. Goes for a nice... Jester goes for a nice Lovely Kiss again. And goes to his Lax, so that would have been fatal had the Jinx taken that, because it was a turn that it inflicted para. Forces the T-Tar out with Lovely Kiss and gets it on Raikou, which probably is Sleep Talk, but still, it's at 73%, no lefties, so it's very scary to stay in on Jinx with this. You know, Jinx is a very scary Mon and can get some nice rolls. So, good of Jester to switch out on turn 12 there, because after that first Thunder, it's not... you're not getting as much value. You don't KO the Raikou from this range, so you might as well preserve what amount of HP you can keep on the Jinx, which does matter. And we see that Jester's forced to make a switch here, going to his Lax. Oops. I clicked pause. I didn't click finish the turn. I wanted to comment on that before spoiling it, but the Lax taking a Rock Slide, I don't necessarily love the fact that you're using this, because whatever move T-Tar has, too bad it was already revealed, but whatever move T-Tar has isn't going to be good for Lax. Lax, unless it's something like Lovely Kiss, but it clearly is not, doesn't want to stay in on Tar, especially if it's paralyzed and at 44%. So, and we do see a dynamic punch, but Siatam just as easily could have gone for a para flinch. And those odds aren't bad odds, so Rock Slide has good odds of flinching. And we see a T-Bolt. T-Bolt Rock Slide D-Punch, which is like pretty insane. Huge punish. No crit on the Tar. So Siatam's going to be able to take out that Cloyster without yet having laid spikes of his own. And he's going to deal also 65%. So this T-Tar is 2 for 1. Or maybe 2 for 3. As we finally see a real normal resisting phaser, but on a double electric team? That's pretty crazy. So 2 normal resists, and neither of them are Golem or Skarmory. So it's Really odd. And Siatam scouts, I guess, for a move like I don't know, EQ or Surf or Fire Blast, and goes to the Lax, sets up on the Tar, and we're gonna see if it's Sleep Talk or not. We don't know. Steelix comes in on a Thief Gar. Do I have anything to say in my notes? Not now. Not now, I don't. Oh, but this turn was nice, sorry. So we see that hang on a second. All right. So here, Steelix pretty much threatens the Gar. Thief Gars don't generally run coverage moves with which to hit Steelix. So there's a very high chance of switching. You could switch to Jinx. It's kind of risky, but you could do it. Or you can switch to Zapdos. So knowing this, Siatam will go to his own Zapdos, which could also be just as easily be Sleep Talk with the Steelix there, meaning that with a Thunder, it could also potentially 1v1 the Gengar. Whatever it's going to land a Thunder on, most importantly, is going to deal a lot of damage to, and it gets a Para, as you see here. So no luck for Jester there, but also it's very much a fish to rely on having no electric resist on a team. So the Tar goes down, but it took out 2 Mons and weakens the Zapdos. The Cloyster doesn't boom here, but he can keep that for later. Forgot to mention, with Lax gone so early into the game, double electric is just so annoying to deal with. It can just go ham. You need a lot of things to go in your favor, and to have no electric resist again. So this game is very risky for Jester. It's very shaky. Like Siatam switches out here, which I kind of like as a play. Reason being that if he clicks rest, he's only putting it into further danger because of an EQ. But he also knows that the Raiku's the fastest thing in the game right now. There's nothing outspeeding it. So whatever it comes into, if it gets phased in, it's just going to be able to click rest. I forgot to talk about the Crunch. Crunch is obviously good against Gengar and bad against pretty much everything else. But it can sort of punish Perish Trap, which is something someone could easily go for. EQ on the Gengar, goes for Boom, doesn't kill the Zap because it's not guaranteed. And this Zap outspeeds and can kill the Jinx in return, but misses. So suddenly it's a little scary for Siatam. He has a healthy-ish Lax, but nothing great at sleep checking. So the Raikou is in, and it's just going to stay in and murder this Jinx on the switch in. Interesting. For the same reasons mentioned already, nothing can take a Thunder. Not even this T-Tar, which can para itself. It can die. It can kill the Raikou, but it's wishful thinking at best. With through a para and somehow you manage to crit. I don't know. So it was a good turn for him to click Sleep Talk, arguably, as he could have always just gone to something else after, without conceding too much momentum, as we see. And this just pays off. So it was a mid-risk, mid-reward, but it went really well for Siatam, and this was kind of a dominating series of turns, I would say. We do see Hidden Power Water as Executor is becoming less and less common, and more Zapdos are concerned with beating grounds than they are with beating opposing Zap. The Cloyster just beats this Tar, and that's game 3. You know, that's our third game. Seattle doing pretty well. So, yeah. I like this game much more than I liked the game versus Hyoga. We're going to go on to M-Dragon and Alice, who are also already proven players, already very strong, very solid, but M-Dragon perhaps more in need of proof that, you know, he doesn't just have a legacy to uphold, and that he can very much play with the big kids. As we haven't seen M-Dragon play in SPL besides maybe last year in a while. So, at least not for GSC. So, yeah. We got Lax versus Zap. The classic David and Goliath. We get a crit turn 1. In comes Rainbringer. Fun thing, because Alice sometimes would go by Rain on Discord. And we see really unlucky Lovely Kiss turn 1. Turn 3 missing, which just absolutely sucks. Just awful. Surf also crits. I don't know if this is what you would call an overpredict, but Alice goes for a safe play. M-Dragon goes for the Lovely Kiss, goes to a Suicune. So it's a pretty, most likely a very old-fashioned stall team, like the Double Dog. Alice is just going to boom, just take it home, you know? And it's so annoying. And we see Golem on Zap, as Alice just makes this amazing execution with the Phantom Executioner, blocking a spin. It was a Hail Mary spin, too, and just doubles to Eggy. So blocking spin and threatening out the spinner before it can even take those spikes away. So much initiative, so much momentum. Steals lefties, so despite for 2 turns being on the field and revealing that it doesn't have leftovers, gets a lot of value out of it. Could potentially stay in, but instead goes to the Zap to threaten it around, or threaten it out. And we see Hidden Power, and M-Dragon is just going to go for that spin. It was good of him to go for that really risky, to some extent, switch, but it was very beneficial because without that spin, his Lax, his main offensive win con with which he can make sure that Alice has to, you know, respect him, it would not have come back. But with the spikes permanently gone, there's a chance. So good on him to do that. Unfortunately, he has nothing with which to check this Steelix unless he gets the Lax in. So he's going to go to Foray, perhaps get some spikes. In comes this Gengar who steals leftovers from Foray. Not a big deal, in my opinion. Raikou coming in. The Gengar could boom and will certainly KO here. And that's exactly what happens. Not sure about that play. Even if it had gotten Thunderbolt and Parried, the Gengar, it wasn't going to kill the Gengar. So, kind of risky. You made some nice switches. Could have possibly, feasibly doubled back to any of the normal resists on the team. Now, you know, whereas before there was a chance, now now it's very, very difficult. Not impossible, but it's very difficult. Alice just going for a Thunder, which I respect. Don't give Lax any opportunities to come in. And now it's more or less out of range. It has to be a max roll for a Thunder. Lax is going to rest, but again, Alice has her own Lax with which to threaten. So, unfortunately, M Dragon is going to have to switch out. Maybe could have burned one turn before going. Puts the Lax on a timer. Flamethrower versus Toxic. Drill Peck. And decides not to go to Golem yet. Which I suppose is okay. I guess. Earthquake. But at this point, the game is pretty much over because M Dragon cannot really fight back. Yeah. Alice is just going to rest. So now the Toxic is gone. There's only one normal resist. Alice can set up on this Golem, even if it has Roar. What are you going to do? How are you going to react to this? Just goes for a double edge. So this game is pretty much done. It's very hard to play against this, and I think that, yeah, he just booms, or she booms. She booms on the Lax, so the Lax couldn't do anything in this game. The Suicune and the Lovely Kiss mattered so freaking much. So much. The game would have looked a little different. So we do see a repeat with the same core, same team as Century Expresses, but different moves. Curse Flame Lax, which is really good on a team like this. Basically just beats this team. But Suicune would have been very helpful. So that kind of sucks, but a little insider's note. The week for the bigs was already lost. So M-Dragon didn't really bring the team that they wanted. So, yeah. At least could also be a bluff. We don't know. That leaves us with one last game. Just like last time. Conflict is in the back, in the last slot. I think this is the last in order, but there's no telling from the links. So we do have Hyoga Phoenix versus Conflict. Hyoga can be an exciting player or a player that sometimes doesn't deliver, but still is a really strong competitor. So this was probably the second matchup I was looking forward to seeing. And I don't feel disappointed at all. We got Lax on Lax. So this might have been the first Lax on Lax that we see this week. Haven't seen any Nidoking leads. So Cloyster coming in. It's always interesting to see Double Edge first, because probably you want to get a trade. You want to get a lot of damage on the Lax turn one. You want to probe the opponent for information. If you damage them, maybe you say you win a speed tie. You damage them and they go for a curse. There's a number of things that you can do. You can go to your phaser as they go for an attacking move. And so you have some sort of an advantage in terms of momentum. You could go to a boomer. You can go to a lot of things. You could also boom with your own Lax. And even if you don't win the speed tie, if you have self-destruct lead Lax, and you damage them, you chip them, then you can OHKO opposing Lax that are chipped, even at +1, even after the curse and all that shit. So that's nice. Look at all that damage. 38, 36. That's a lot. Nothing to be scoffed at here. And there's a crit, so that certainly would have killed Hyoga's Lax. Goes to Cloy, so it's not as tragic. Gets the spike, survives, can boom, can surf. can do a little dance. But we go to licks, which is interesting, as conflict goes to Scarm and Whirlwind. So we see that, as you can see, at high level play, there's always going to be someone trying to probe the enemy team for information. So we see at first what looked like a pretty basic team. You know, you have Lax, Chloe, Licks, and one could say, okay, so the back is probably, you know, Jinx, Gar, Zap, or Eggy, Eggy something else. I don't know, Machamp and Zap, or Vaporeon or something. But instead he goes for Whirlwind, and look at what we know. We know Zap comes in, we see T-Tar. So T-Tar plus Licks means one of these mons are offensive, most likely the Tar. The Toxic is nice. And conflict comes in with Quagsire. Quagsire on stall is the only way it's played, usually, if you consider Quagsire teams to be stall. So it comes in on Zapdos, and the fact that the Zapdos is on a timer means you get the potential for a Belly Drum turn, because Hidden Power, I don't know, Water and Ice don't really do all that much to Quagsire. It can't even 5-hit KO the Quag, so it can chip the Zapdos, it can use HP Rock. Hyoga really has to respect this Quagsire, especially because he has two fat mons that really hate ground. So the Lax gets crit and is outsped. So this is scary as hell. I don't quite understand that choice. Goes to Starmie. So we see a Starmie. It could be a spinner. We see Psychic, so it's kind of like that other game. And Toxic. It's like, what? Toxic on Quag? When has anyone ever seen this? That's insane. That's certainly not a Belly Drum. In comes the Zapdos. So Toxic Starmie, it's crippled for life. There's nothing Hyoga can do. If this is HP Water, Hyoga's in a bad spot. But we see conflict going to Fori, getting some spikes, taking some chip. Hyoga probably can't do anything better besides this. It's still nice damage, so this could ease him forward, as the Skarmory is unable to phase this Licks. But at the very least, the Licks is forced to click Whirlwind, consume some Earthquake PP. We see the last mon revealed on Conflict's end, and it's Tar. But Tar's not going to stay in unless Conflict wants to go for a Hail Mary Fire Blast crit, which I don't think is in their best interest. So what do you do? What do you do if you're Conflict? Well, you simply just keep coming in. The problem with this is that it kind of exposes you, because then you can get swept. But Conflict weighs his options. So Steelix can Oko Skarmory eventually if it keeps phasing like this. The thing is, even if he loses Skarm, Hyoga has a chipped Lax, and that's it. So, as I was saying, Steelix can't do damage to Skarmory unless it booms. That's not always super fun, but Hyoga has some initiative because he has a Tar, so he could still freely boom on Skarm. And the Skarmory can't phase this thing out, no matter what. Because even on a turn where the Licks doesn't do that, doesn't click Roar, but if it clicks Boom, it could kill it. So at like +6, it's guaranteed to kill. And it can constantly curse as Conflict is forced to go into Skarm each time. That said, even if Hyoga were to boom on the primary normal resist, his Lax is dead to spikes, more or less. And here we see Hidden Power. There's a boom on the Zap. That's nice, but it's not amazing. In comes me. I was going to spin away those spikes, but probably take a double edge for its troubles. And Lax is just going to KO the me. Actually, the me's going to die to poison, which is pretty interesting. And Cloy can go for spikes or boom. Going to sack itself. Does this T-Tar have D-Punch? Yes, it does. Conflict goes to Skarmory. Is outsped and takes a T-Bolt. Or not outsped, but hits itself and takes a T-Bolt. And dies to Ancient Power. Pretty weird, but all of a sudden, Hyoga's back in the game. Quag takes a Dynamic Punch, but uses Rest. So, EQ Toxic Rest means it has Sleep Talk, and it deals a nice amount. Hyoga kind of making a desperate attempt here with the Ancient Power. Gets a nice crit, but... Oh, and there is a... Quag is still confused. Could kill it, but confusion ends right in the nick of time for Conflict. Suddenly, T-Tar's options are running out. Hyoga's options are running out. But he can rest the Lax back up, potentially, through a Sleep Talk turn with a bit of luck. Just for safety, he's going to switch to Zap. I don't know if that's going to help all that much, but there is some initiative. There is some chance that something can happen here. Zapdos is on a timer. Lands a Thunder. Could be Sleep Talk, EQ. Just spamming the hell out of EQ, not letting that Lax come in. That's what Conflict's game is right now. Same as before. Toxic, Sleep Talk, all that good stuff. They're hoping to outlast each other. 4A comes in on a rest turn. Perfect turn sequencing. Conflict, even if the 4A dies, Conflict will simply just bring back whatever can threaten the Lax out. So manages to land the spikes and spin away his own. So now it's really just Conflict's game to lose. He's stalling out the Zap. In comes the Quagsire, proving to be a meta threat, even without its meta threatening moveset. And you see here, hidden power after hidden power, and it's still not doing enough, even after a crit. It's just not going to cut it. 5, it doesn't even scratch the 5-hit KO, with 20%, 23%. That's not enough. So this Zapdos has no way of getting past that Quagsire whatsoever. This 4A is here. It's free to do whatever it likes. It can boom. It can do things. It can spin crit. It just dies because why not? Why not stall out every possible turn? Although this could be a little bit risky, because apparently the Lax doesn't die to spikes. But yeah. So Conflict is going to take this opportunity, perhaps to set up with the Snorlax if it is Curse Lax. We're going to find out soon enough. It's Surf. Okay, that was awkward. Letting in the... This is the only mon that would let Lax in, so I don't know. But just consuming more PP, and you get the drill. Conflict kind of won with the Quagsire. And it wasn't even Drum. Oh, shit. A turn where things can happen, and things happened. Good on Hyoga to bet on that, but yeah, Hyoga forfeits after that turn. It really could have gone it could have gone south for Conflict had things gone differently. But turns out the Lax never really revealed all that much, and that's about it. So as for predictions, that's all that we have left to do, is make some predictions. Now, interestingly enough, in 1 week we saw dynamic punch T-Bolt T-Tars, which is odd. So now let's open up the discussions. Let's see. Predictions. Here are my... I might actually change my predictions. I don't quite remember what I wrote, but... my predictions are... So I wrote this. I don't know. I'm so uncertain about this. So D4 is coming in hot and doing really well, but I don't think that they will necessarily beat Fear, but they'll put up a good challenge. Raichi, I feel uncertain as to whether they could beat Real Jester or not. Raichi, Real Jester are kind of outliers. Alice or Century Express, honestly, I don't know. Alice feels like they could win. Century Express also. Hyoga or M Dragon. It's very hard, honestly. This is what you have before you. And Seattle, I'm in conflict. So, anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. And now I can ask that if you would be so kind to leave a like, then it would be appreciated.